Will you check the sound? Welcome, everyone. I am delighted to have Intersections back in Cedar Rapids and online virtually as a hybrid, and just very excited to be back and to see everyone. As I said earlier to folks, just to see your faces in person is phenomenal. I'm Connie Ryan. I'm the Executive Director of Interfaith Alliance, and this is Intersections. And we have not been in person for 2 years, and with COVID and everything, and are just grateful to each of you. And for those of you who are eating and brought your own lunch, we will do that this month and then also in May. And then the Planning Steering Committee will assess how to proceed in the fall. We'll be back in September after the summer break, which is our normal process for Intersections. And we'll figure out the food part of that also in the lineup for the fall and winter and spring for next year. So I am going to turn the microphone over to Libby Slappy, who is part of the advisory team and is a friend of our speaker. So I asked Libby to do the introduction. Thank you, Libby.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. Hi. Really good to see your faces. I'm not going to speak all of the details about my longtime friendship with Steve, but I will tell you that we were classmates in college in the 70s. So that probably speaks for itself. Steve and I met at CO and have remained friends ever since. I'm really glad that he chose to stay in Iowa and not go back to New York State, where he's from. He is retired and had a successful telecommunications career. And now his unpaid job is as the chair of the Political Action Committee of the local NAACP chapter. So in that role, Steve is providing leadership for a voter rights coalition. And the plan is to bring together a variety of partners who share the same objective: to educate the community about redistricting, satellite voting, advocacy, and voter registration. And I think that everyone in this room understands what's at stake with the 2022 elections and how critical voter engagement is. So Steve is going to be in conversation with us today about this coalition that is formed and growing, and then the important role that all of us can play in being part of the solution. So please welcome my longtime friend, Steve Moshier.
I think I've done something.
You're wired. Wait.
I don't know.
So
But there you
Connie,
go.
do I need to do anything with this mic,
I
like
think-
turn it off or just hand it to you?
There you go.
Okay, take it, Connie.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? All right. Thank you, Libby. I'm glad you left out some of the details of that we've experienced while we were at CO. That was very helpful. And my kids don't know anything about that either. So, all right. Well, again, I'm Steve Moshier, and I came out here to go to college. I'm from Westchester County in upstate New York, just north of Manhattan. I grew up in public housing my entire life while I was going through school and before I left to come out here. So my first opportunity to be in a house or living in a house wasn't until I had been out here for a while, in which I was able to rent a house and eventually got married after I got out of college, and we ended up buying a house. But I think we're in our third house. Anyway, but just to let you know that my roots are rather far away from where I grew up, but yet I call Iowa my home now. And part of that is my reason for why I'm active in what I'm trying to do as far as voter rights, because this is my state. They gave me the opportunity to grow old and with a family, and I'm a little upset with how things are going right now. And part of that is very simple. We changed the laws, the election laws, in order to suit our own needs, not because there's widespread voter fraud in the state of Iowa. From what I was able to obtain is that maybe there were 20, 23 convictions for voter fraud in the last 6 years. Okay, now that doesn't mean that it's you or I going in and trying to vote impersonating somebody else. Now, we've got a lot of things in place that protect against that. So there are some things that could have been maybe the address or a person at the wrong place and something got through. So there hasn't been any widespread voter fraud in the state of Iowa. We had Secretary Pate had also attested to that and said that everything was fine. What they didn't account for in the 2020 election is that the voter turnout exceeded expectations. Therefore, something must have been wrong, according to the folks at the state legislatures, that why are so many people voting? Well, sometimes if you give them a reason to vote, they're going to come out. And the other thing is that don't assume that because the numbers are there that there's some fraudulent action going on. But that's sort of how we got these restrictive voting law changes. And I believe when they were looking at across the country at that time for during that period, there were roughly about 16 of them that were voted on and passed in many of the states. Well, we have 9 of them. Whoa. And why? You have to question that. It's supposed to be voting is a pillar of democracy. Now, we'll send our brave men and women in service to go fight in another country for the sake of democracy and their right to vote. But yet the first thing we'll do when the election doesn't come in our favor, we're going to change the laws so that people understand that we're here, we're in power, and we plan to stay here. My real concern is voter suppression is one thing, but voter nullification seems to be the ultimate goal, is that I can go and say, I don't like the outcome, so I'm going to nullify what you, the voter, have done and put in my own results in my own people. That seems to be more along the line of what you really want to deal with, and that's unfortunate. But we have to stand up to it at some point in order to make things the way they should be, which is one person, one vote, and the outcome, you accept the outcome. If you're the winner, be gracious in victory. If you're the loser, then accept the defeat, move on, run a better campaign, and maybe your message is not resonating with the people out there. But to just say that if I didn't win, there's fraud, that doesn't really sound right as far as I'm concerned. But then again, if you know the individuals that are saying that, you can understand why they're doing it. Well, my objective today is to try to have a conversation with you. I read a book from Dr. Robert Livingston, and the name of the book is called Conversation. And he says one of the most powerful ways to build knowledge, awareness, and empathy, and ultimately affect change, is to have a conversation, to break it down so that it's like I'm in your kitchen or in your living room, and we're sitting across from either on the kitchen table or the coffee table and having a respectful, civil conversation and about things that we may not necessarily agree on, but we've at least set the bar higher than what seems to be going on in today in either our local government or in DC. Civil conversation. The ability to agree and disagree and come to some kind of conclusion that is best suited for the people in general and not for your party. So part of that is a tough thing to deal with unless you start holding elected officials accountable. And by what I mean by that is if they are running on a particular platform and they say that this is what they're going to do to get your vote, then you need to make sure that that's what's happening. You need to show up at meetings. You need to get in touch with them. You need to let them know what you think and what you feel. And when they're doing that, what they said they were going to do, then thank them. It's not an easy task being an elected official, because if you're doing it right, you not only serve the people that voted for you, you also serve the people that voted against you. You are there to do the work for those in general, not specifically for your friends or neighbors down there. You represent everybody. And that's part of where we're going in today's climate, that we seem to huddle with just like-minded or party-affiliated groups, and that's it. And you forget why you were elected. So anyway, that's part of what I'm trying to do, is just have a conversation with you. Trying to stay away from statistics. That was one of those fun classes we had at CO. And oh, I'm sorry. You obviously missed the point about, yeah, because you don't have to be truthful. You just have to let the stats speak for themselves, and then that works out. As it was stated, that I am part of the NAACP, the Political Action Committee. And for a long time, that committee was a committee of one. In spite of maybe my concern and voicing the need for help, it still remained one. And except now, after so many tries, I've got some folks that are on the committee with me in a temporary manner. And part of that is so that we have an event coming up on April 16th, which I'll speak to in a while. And they said they would help me try to put that on. And that's part of the reason why I'm here today. But I just wanted to share with you, this is the purpose of what I have to deal with for the committee. Says that the committee seeks to increase registration and voting, work for enactment of municipal, state, and federal registration designed to improve the educational and political and economic status of minority groups, seek the repeal of racially discriminatory legislation, work to improve the administration of justice, work to secure equal enforcement of the law, and keep the national office and local office informed of all proposed legislation which affects minority groups. This committee is nonpartisan and shall not endorse candidates for public office. We sort of took that last statement and made it part of our outreach, our coalition, voters coalition, because regardless of who the party is, majority or minority, that can flip-flop. And then if you alienate one group, then it's hard for you to work with that group when they're in the majority. So it's best to try to get it so that you're nonpartisan and you're not endorsing a candidate. Now, you know from how the climate is and how things are going, and you know who is the majority and who's the minority party. I don't need to repeat that, but you are all aware of that, so you know that part. For sake of disclosure, I'm on the Linn County Democratic Central Committee with our fearless leader, Brett, who has been the president or chair for quite some time. I'm also serve on the District Central Committee as a co-vice chair of the new 2nd District, but was the 1st District. So that's where I lean towards, but in this situation, my message is clear. I'm not supporting any candidate, and it's nonpartisan as our effort, because I want to reach everybody with the same message. Voter registration, voters voting, voter accountability, it shouldn't matter which party it is, that we should all have the same rights, and it should be transparent, it should be accessible, and those who run for office should not have to worry that the next time around the rules have changed. And I make reference, Joel Miller's here from the auditor's office, and I appreciate you being here, and I'm going to use you as an example. In one election, in the 2020 election, he had a procedure and process in place that had been very successful, and then he used that quite frequently. And then 2021 comes around, and there are change in the election laws of things that he is not able to do. He cannot go out, and I do appreciate when you did this, that he would send out something to those about absentee ballot. Do you need one? It's just asking you, do you need one, not saying here or trying to influence you to voting. They said he can't do that. Why? Well, that was an easy approach to getting people engaged in the process. Part of his function should be promoting civic engagement. He's not promoting Democratic Party. He's not saying that anti this or that. He's saying, do you need a ballot? Now it's up to the individual to return that back in or not. But he's just making them aware of it. Well, they said he can't do that. Drop box. County our size, Linn County, second largest county, we have one drop box, which is now down by his office building, the county administrative building. It's there. But it used to be he would put out several conveniently for folks that would be able to come and put their ballot in, and everything was fine. Well, why is that? Why do we get it so that you get down to one drop box? That's not convenient. You know, and if you look at it, if you're semi-confined to your house, and I mean that by, and respectfully, that you're on in years or you're disabled or it just doesn't work out, this is not on the beaten path of everybody in Cedar Rapids, Marion, Hiawatha, Robbins, Mount Vernon, you know, the cities in the Linn County area. But that's what they've made it do. That's not accessible, not transparent in what they were trying to do. It becomes obvious that some of the direction they were going was not really in the best interest of the individuals who make up the county, and who also feel that, do they need a deterrent not to vote? We've already mentioned two. Is that you think, oh, well, I have got to request this myself. I've got to go down here to this drop box if I want to get it in. Well, you shouldn't be in a situation where you're making folks have to think about it. It should be automatic. Now, I was talking to an individual from LULAC, who's the equivalent of the NAACP on the Latino aspect. He said he was in Brazil. In Brazil, you're automatically registered to vote at age 18. When voting comes, if you don't vote, you're fined. So they take it rather seriously. Now, we don't, because we're part of that thought process that no one can tell us what to do because we're Americans and we can figure it out ourselves, and yet it's like herding cats. It's not successful most of the time, but it does happen. So, and I was surprised, and they were surprised, the folks he was talking to in Brazil, that, oh, you have that choice? We don't have that choice. And that's not a bad idea. But what I see is the response to that is getting election day off as a holiday is about the same equivalent of being fined or not, but it's your decision at that stage. And having an election as a holiday is part of some legislation that happens to be sitting on the desk in the Senate because of the filibuster. It does not allow this to come up, but because of that, and that's a whole nother area I will get into at some point. So when I look at it, and I did mention as far as shortened window to apply for a mail ballot, shortened deadlines to deliver the mail ballot. It also goes into who can deliver it for you. That doesn't make sense if, to me, when it used to be that somebody could, who's going that way to the ballot, could pick yours up in your house, your neighbor or whatever. No, and I don't understand. It is sealed, and why does it make a difference in that? So I don't know where they're at on these proposed changes, but they're looking at voter verification number on an absentee affidavit envelope as one of the proposed changes coming up. Mailing absentee ballots 3 days earlier. Emailing ballots to voters who cannot read, mark paper ballots, and partisan primaries for city and school elections. Why are we still tinkering with the election laws as opposed to rolling it back to where it was? You know, we're not making anything any better, any easier for people to vote. We're still looking at things that how we can discourage folks from voting. We're not making it transparent. We're not making it accessible. So the only real rule is if you have an opportunity, vote early. There are satellite locations that the auditor's office, election services, generally rely on, and that's out at Lindale. I did that last time of the elections. I voted there. You get in and get out rather easily. It's pretty accessible. They got enough people there to explain if you have any issues. I know the libraries are trying to do their usual thing. But if you're concerned about mailing a ballot in, an absentee ballot, and the time span, then go to one of the satellites. And then your ballot, your vote will count that day and not worry about did it get delivered? Was there something in the post office that caused a delay? Because if you're beyond that date, it's the way it was before. There was some leadway about the postmark date, and at the time that they got to the office, your ballot was still counted. Now it's got to be in there on the day, that day, in order for it to be counted. So there are some changes. So where does that lead me? Voter coalition. And part of that, and the reason for that is there are several groups out there, and League of Women Voters, Indivisible, the Advocates for Social Justice, obviously the NAACP, LULAC, Co-Votes, Mount Mercy. We're trying to deal with Kirkwood and some others, and Cornell, who are really engaged in trying to get people out to vote. Now, what I looked at it was, geez, we're all doing the same thing. Why are we not working together? We're all in our own silos, and we don't know what the other one is doing or what the strengths of what the others are doing that we could collaborate on and be more efficient. So what we ended up doing and I started for our event that we're having on the 16th, was I started visiting with each one of these groups, and then I ran into Indivisible and Advocates for Social Justice, and they said, well, did you ever think about maybe getting us all together and having a conversation? And I said, well, you know, that is working smarter instead of harder, which is what I was doing, because I had made appointments to talk to each and every one of the groups. And they said, well, yeah, that's not a bad idea, and I think we could proceed by getting everybody in the room and be a little bit more successful. Well, that was a great idea, and I thought, okay, you hit it. That's sort of where we were going, but now we're going to get there sooner. So I still visited all the people that I wanted to visit with, but now I had a different message to them. We wanted a voter rights coalition of some kind, whatever the name we come up with is fine. But we wanted all the groups that are actually doing the same thing to be in the same room and talk about the ideas in which they're working on and how the things are that they're trying to do that either we can do collectively or we can make better, or you can tell us what things didn't work so that we're not all chasing the same thing, but we get better results. And I said, here's the other thing too. When you go and visit an elected official, or you message something, you have collective power. You have 4, 5, 6 groups signing on and saying, this is what we'd like to see done, or do you have time to visit with us so you can hear our concerns? It's easier to say, I'm busy, I don't have time, to one person, but it's not quite as easy to say that when I have 4 or 5 groups and their collective membership to be able to say that and come out with, sure, I have time, when do you want to meet? It says a lot differently. But the other is, you should never really approach elected official as an adversary. You should look at them as a potential partner. And part of that is to say, which is real important, that you have something that you need. They may already have that idea in the back of their head, but they don't know if they have support for it. And what they're looking at is, if you're willing to get behind me, then yeah, I'll walk with you. But if you are coming at them in an adversarial role and saying, you need to do this, I'm demanding that you do this, they're going to take a step back. And rightly so, because if you look at it, anybody, a friend or a family member that you've had any approach with, you will understand if you use that same approach to them, they're going to recoil as well. So you have to look at it in the broader sense and look at it that it's important to try to do things that work. And everybody's out there to try to be a better person, to be more of a community participant, but it's real important for you to kind of understand that part. So we've tried a lot of things, and I've put out some agendas of what we're trying to do for our meeting tomorrow on the coalition part. We're trying to recap what we did a few weeks ago, some of the groups that were getting back together. And then on the 16th, I put an agenda that we're trying to do also, which is, initially we did it last year, it was the Black and Brown Coalition on election changes. So what I have asked, and Joel's office was very gracious to do on the 16th, is that we're trying to gather people together, and this is where my ask comes to you guys, is that we're trying to get folks either obviously Black and brown, disability, age, LGBT, everybody who would have been impacted by the changes, and come down. And Joel's office has allowed Valerie Smith to come and speak to us on part of the changes, the process, what the auditor's office / election services is expecting you to know. Because the very first question, is everybody here registered to vote? Okay. Does everyone know where their polling place, where you're voting at? Does everybody know that? Okay, and also realize that with the redistricting and with also some of the changes there, that we may not have as many voting places that we've had in the past, but you also have to know that the folks on the ballot are all geared towards the new districting, and the folks that you're talking to today are all still in the same district that they are in. So those changes will take effect after the election for them. But see, you all responded favorably, which is good. I could be in another room and not have that same numbers. But first of all, voting registration is really a pet peeve of mine, is why we've been registering people for decades. We have not run out of people yet that
are registered? And why is this not automated? Why is it not when somebody turns 18 that they're registered to vote and that they have to opt out? And then therefore then the elections office can do whatever they need to do, and they don't have to contact you to opt in. That should be automatic, and they should be getting that information. Now, the other flip side of that is the big thing is voters, getting them to the polls. We should have been moving from voter registration to actively getting people to vote. Those are the numbers that I'm more concerned about than I am with registration. So we had good voter turnout when Barack Obama was running. We had good turnout in the 2020 election. But we don't seem to have that. That's not a cycle that we can depend on unless we actually get out and do something. We need to be active, and I say we collectively, all of us, it's our responsibility that if you're going to vote, ask somebody, neighbor or something, I'm going to go vote. Do you want to come with me? Because you know you're both in the same precinct, and it makes good sense that why not go together? So that's something that we need to do and we're going to work on. So we're trying in this little group here that we're doing, with Valerie going through that. Then the second part of our meeting is that we're going to try to invite as many as we can candidates who are on the primary ballot to come and do a meet and greet. And part of this is no political speeches. Come and meet the people in the community and let them see who you are, because part of this is that some folks think that elected officials, you can't go up and talk to them. But they're just like anybody in your neighborhood. They're nothing to be afraid of, but you need to feel that you can approach them. Maybe you have something else to talk to them that's not job related. Maybe you just want to chat with them. It's somebody that you think is friendly and that you'd like to get to know. But the other is that you might feel more comfortable voting for them if you've had that opportunity. So that's part of what we're going to try to do on the 16th. And I'm going to try to get as many as I can to understand that for an hour, we're available from the people that are there. Now, as again, I put out the agenda for that, and hopefully we can get some of you to attend and trying to see what's going on. So I think, am I getting close to my time or? Okay, I know I kind of rambled, and I don't know if it was any different than the other kind of speeches, but.
You are fine. So if you want to go to questions,
Sure. That would.
if you'll raise your hand, and I'll bring the microphone to you.
At the beginning, you were talking about the party in the last election. Well, they don't want to have things in the last election as if they had lost it. But the party in power won the election pretty much landslide here in Iowa, but still they seem to be feeling that they insecure in their ability to stay in power. So I can see maybe in a state where they might have lost some power, but they consolidated it. Why all this stuff?
Oh, and that's a good point, and that's part of why some of our discussion is why the changes when you've either gained seats, and like you said, you solidified your power. But I think in some aspect, it's still all following the plan, which nationally they're trying to do that, and they all seem to fall in lockstep. And that's the plan for that party, is that to make it so it's not obtainable. And ultimately, the objective is that those who have the power are worried about the influx of folks who are non-white that will make them a majority in numbers, and they're worried they may lose power in that sense because they make the assumption that everybody coming in, immigrant or what, is going to vote for the other party. And yet that isn't necessarily true 100%. They may vote in numbers for the other party, but doesn't mean everybody's voting in that. So there's a lot of changes.
Representative Art Stade from Cedar Rapids. I'm concerned, the voting coalition, you mentioned the goals about voting and having more people have more access to it. But you also at the same time say that this is non-political or bipartisan issue, but it's not. Clearly, the Republicans have tried to pass and have passed legislation in Iowa over and over to restrict or suppress voting. You mentioned some of the problems that have occurred. So I'm wondering why you wouldn't endorse candidates that want to have more access to voting and have the vote count versus those who don't, because it's clear who they are.
Yes, that's true. But our charter for NAACP and charter for LULAC and several of the other groups state about being nonpartisan. It's so individually, yes, that's where I lean, but that's not necessarily.
Well, it could be bipartisan if they were not for suppressing the vote, but when they indicate that they are, then it's becomes partisan in this state.
That's true. And
And LULAC does endorse.
well,
They have a pact that
yeah. But what part of this, though, that we know when we try to invite, and we've done this too at the NAACP, but and so LULAC as well, when we invite politicians to an event, we know which party is going to show up. We know that. When we do things, we know which party is going to respond. We don't have to come out publicly and state that, but we know where it's going to go. And that part. So we can't tell you who to vote for. We can't tell you what party to endorse, but we think everybody knows. So it's the unspoken word, and it seems to work out.
I like a good party, and I think that this is a really terrific opportunity for the coalition to plan something big on a day that satellite voting is open. Declare it whatever catchy name you want to declare it. You know, rock the vote is something that's been previously used, but literally make an occasion of it where people do come and vote early, get that vote locked in, like you talked about, you know, if it's at Lindale. And if this kind of big event were planned, let the Auditor Election Services Office know that they might have to staff up or declare it for the whole day, you know, from the time that voting is open till the time that it closes. And then when it closes, the big dance party at whatever location. I mean, I feel like we are being challenged, and we can meet the challenge and exceed the challenge. We can show them that they may try to suppress our voices, suppress our votes, but, you know, we're not going to be suppressed. So it's not a question. It's,
I was waiting for it.
okay, so my question is, have you thought of that?
Well, last year when we held this event, it was the satellite location in the Wellington Heights area was open that day, and we had suggested folks to go and vote. But unless we go with them, we're not sure if anyone even showed up. But yes, that's a good idea, and I can bring that up at our next meeting. Yes.
Hello, my name is Linda Armitage, and I just wanted to ask you or make a comment. Over the past few years, I've noticed that when we get television coverage of other states and cities for their voting lines, like let's say Milwaukee or some city in the South, you always see a lot of people, like 2 blocks worth of people waiting to vote. I guess I want to commend here in Iowa. I don't think any Iowans, as far as I know, ever have to wait to vote longer than a 5 or 10 minute vote. I mean, just and I wondered why other states and counties and districts in the United States that have a lot more population than here in Iowa, why aren't they calling in more people to help at their voting polls? Why are we so fast? We don't have to usually worry about standing in line with a bottle of water on a hot day or something. Why are we so well taken care of here in the state of Iowa at our voting polls so that they're quick and efficient versus other places in the United States? I don't, do you know what the background is to that?
I know that we have somebody here who has some expertise in that event with, if you can just, Joel, say a few words to that.
I don't like, come up there. I don't know if I could say a few words about any of this stuff.
I know.
I have some choice words to say. That would be very short. Want me to get over here?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, then I don't. do I
Well,
need
you
that?
need that.
I need that. Okay, so the question was, why don't we see the lines here? We're kind of a victim of our own success. I'm trying to make voting convenient. And the new laws have made voting inconvenient. And the lines that you haven't seen in the last few years, I think you are going to see in November 2022. Why? Because the ability to vote by mail has been made as almost as inconvenient as possible. What do I mean by that? We used to have in 2020, you could submit your ballot up to, there was a deadline to request an absentee ballot 10 days before the election. Submit a request for an absentee ballot 10 days before the election. And then in 2021, the new election law changed that to 15 days. So in the November 2021 election, we had 296 people miss that deadline, and 145 of those people did not vote here in Linn County. I don't know what the number is across the state, but that's what happened here. Then couple that with the slowdown in mail. I'm measuring mail delivery times right now. From my study, unscientific, just dropping a letter in a mailbox is taking everything twice as long as it did in 2020. I mailed, for example, I mailed a test envelope at the drugstore, the Hy-Vee drugstore on Boyson Road, Northeast. It took 5 days to get to my office, 5 business days. So, and now you have only 20 days of early voting. So what's going to happen? The people that used to vote by mail are going to miss those deadlines, some of them. Okay, so what's your next choice? Your next choice is to vote in person. Well, you only have 20 days to do that. All right, so you better have a plan to get there. So they're going to end up voting on election day or not at all. I hope it's voting on election day, but it could be not at all. But if they do show up on election day, we're going to have lines, the stuff you haven't seen before. Now, what am I doing to alleviate that? I plan to be open 7 days a week, Saturday and Sunday here in Linn County. I'm encouraging my fellow auditors across the state to do the very same thing. We're going to print absentee ballot request forms in the penny saver. As Steve said, we can't send them out on our own unless you call and request them. But we're going to print it in there. That was very successful. 23% of the people in the November 2020 election returned those penny saver ads to us and voted those. So I consider that a success. Yes, we had to print it 4 times, and they kind of ignored it the first time, but the second, third time, we started seeing the influx of them coming in. So people still want to be to do that. I mean, if you think about it, there's been a lot of questions related to this. Why do you go to the gas station you go to? It's either price or convenience. Why do you order off Amazon? It's price or convenience. Why do we do things in life? Because it's convenient. Why the heck did they make voting so doggone inconvenient? Or vote by mail especially, why did you make it inconvenient? Because we don't want you to use it. Not me, the laws. The legislature, the party in power, decided they don't want you to vote by mail because they believe one party uses that tool, that method more than another party. And as you've commented here, it's about the party in power wanting to remain in power despite the demographics that are occurring across this country. Even in Iowa, not so much in Iowa, but certainly in other parts. So did I answer your question?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Joe.
Hi. I have talked to people that live in Oregon, and they can vote from home in their pajamas. They don't go in to vote. They always vote by mail. And I just don't know why the laws in this country are so diverse that from one state to the other, it can be different. And my question, though, I was going to ask on Art Stade's point is, if we can't endorse a candidate, how about publishing names of people that have voted against the voting law, like individually, and they're all going to be Republicans? You know, getting their names out there, saying this is why it's harder to vote, kind of thing.
That's it's a possibility to do that. And I think that, yeah, there's some issues, and yet their own party members vote by mail. They weren't thinking this thing out as thoroughly. They just kept thinking the opposition party uses it more. They weren't thinking about their own folks who, you know, are snowbirds or you know, they're not able to get out and they're not as mobile. They vote by mail as well. So they just had a target, and that target was somebody with a D on their back, and that they were looking for. Yes, sir.
I don't really have a question so much as an observation that you've helped click a light on in my mind. You know, our governor has said she wants to make the state more attractive by changing the tax laws, but they've done so many things to make the state less attractive by not fixing up park ranger houses and not funding schools sufficiently and not paying enough money to fix up the clean water, improve the water supply. And so your premise that people are going to move to this state, you know, black and brown people or other people are going to move to the state that might change the voting dynamics, you know, it doesn't seem to fit together, or maybe it does fit together in terms of what the legislators are doing, making voting more difficult and really making the state less attractive to come to. But that's the observation. That's not really a question.
Well, that's a good observation.
Round two. So Joel has reminded me that if someone votes by mail and they mail in their ballot in what they think is a sufficient amount of time, how do they know if their ballot made it in time? So that, and so if it didn't make it in time, then they know that they better go vote in person. Because I think once it leaves their hands, if it's going through the mail, not the drop box, but through the mail, how do they know?
It has to be received by the auditor's office by a certain date and time.
Right, it has to be received.
Yeah, but you
on-
won't know that.
Okay. You can check online.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And so, again, there are people who don't have computers.
Right.
There are people who don't have smartphones. So it's yet another little chink in the armor to restrict access, because that person is not going to know how to check online
Right.
yeah.
So you're better off trying to vote early
So you're better off voting early.
at a satellite location.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a phone or access to a phone.
Yep, that's,
For those online, the comment was that you can call your local auditor's office also.
Steve, did you mention that there is a suggestion
in the potentially restrictive laws to make state and local primary elections partisan?
That was one of the proposals. I mentioned that.
Okay. Well, the reason I ask is, and I'll defer to the lawmakers in the room, but wouldn't that change require a constitutional amendment in Iowa? Aren't municipal elections by law nonpartisan? So they want to tinker with the Constitution to restrict voting access? Ugh.
I don't think it's
Not constitutional.
again, for those online, there's disagreement on whether it's constitutional or not. We'll look that up. Other questions?
I was horrified to find out there would be one drop box for the whole county of Linn County. And I'm wondering, how will they know who drops it in the box? If you are not related to the person next door to you and you pick it up for an elderly person and drop it, how will they know that you're not a family member, for instance? And will there be access to people in retirement homes to be able to vote if they don't have family members that can pick up their votes?
That's all covered under a different aspect. And Joel, you can respond to that.
So we send out a team to all the nursing home healthcare facilities. But you're asking about, that's by law, we have to do that. And we send out a 2-person team, a Democrat, Republican, to every nursing facility and memory union in the county, well before the election. As far as retirement homes or people that are in assisted living, that doesn't qualify. So how do they get the ballots there? We are also required to provide curbside drive-up voting for anyone to drop things off. Now, we did run into a lady last fall that her doctor ordered her to stay home. She'd already missed the deadline to request an absentee ballot, so she didn't get to vote. There was no way I could legally take a ballot to her, and so she did not, because I'm not going to violate the law. So she was unable to vote. And the drop boxes, Adams County, 2,800 votes, 1 drop box. Linn County, 161,000 votes, 1 drop box. That's the law. I'm advocating that drop boxes be allocated by population. They just did that with supervisors. They lowered the threshold for counties under 15,000 population. Supervisor candidates only had to get 21 signatures. Normally, before, it was 100. In a county that was under 50,000, now they have to get 50 signatures. Again, it was 100. They allocated it by population. My point is, if you can allocate to get on the ballot by population, then why can't we allocate drop boxes by population? It just makes sense. Did I answer your question, though?
Almost, how do you know who drops it in the box?
We don't, but we are required now by law to empty our drop box 4 times a day. It has to be under video surveillance. If you are if you're not related to the person or a member of that household, and you are disabled, then you can have an agent drop that off. But they can only drop off 2 ballots per election, and we do record those people's names when they drop them off. I don't know if I'm related to you or not. Maybe way back. And I don't know who lives in your, we're not going to be the policeman for that. At least the law hasn't came into effect that we have to be the policeman on that yet.
So that is definitely inconvenient and not being accessible and transparent. Why are they doing that? They'd have to respond to that, but it's not in the benefit of those people that live in the state of Iowa. Again, it's an action that's trying to keep a certain group in power, and that's unfortunate. But that's part of why we're trying to get this coalition going and trying to get enough of grassroots support and moving in that direction, so that collectively, there's a lot of good questions and exchanges here, and that's what we're hoping to do in our coalition, is to get that out there see if we can get support and move forward, because these things, they're obvious to you that it doesn't make things easy to vote. And that's what we're supposed to be doing. So go ahead.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you could close with some talking points for folks that refuse to accept that this is voter suppression, right? The narrative that they're pushing is that it's about fraud and preventing fraud. So what do you do when you're talking to folks who don't even accept that the laws that they've put in place are actually suppressing the vote? Because they'll come back and say, but look at the turnout, right? Everything that we put in place, the turnout, because we're having to, increase our efforts because they're making it harder. So how do you talk with folks who don't even accept that premise?
Well, that one's going to be a tough challenge, because there's still those folks out there that believe in the big lie that we all know that is a lie, based on the numbers. When you have record number of turnout voting, but the only thing you can do is ask them, have they seen any fraud? Are they aware of any fraud? And why are the changes there? Because it doesn't make it easy or convenient for anyone to vote. And so I'm not sure you could have a rational conversation with somebody who has that state of mind. So, but the only thing you can do, you don't want to get into a heated discussion with them, because that'll reinforce their beliefs about you for supporting that you're not being cooperative. But so, yes, Peter.
The reality is that I'm originally from the most Republican county in the state, and that's Sioux County. 95% vote Republican. That 95% is going to be smaller. I mean, the dilemma is we don't have enough Democrats, even if none of those Republicans vote. But the reality is this is going to adversely affect Republicans as well. And they've shown that in Georgia. They've shown that and you just got to pray that it really affects them in some of those races. And the reality is that the other part of it is that I don't think it's a good idea for coalitions to be endorsing unless you're the Democratic Party or your Republican Party or you have some particular. I think what we have to do is educate the Republican population that it affects them as well, because it's not just going to be Democrats that are. I mean, unless you're all Democrats, then you're going to be affected more than you would be for the minority Republicans. But those rural areas aren't going to be able to drive. If they're only going to have one drop box, they're going to be adversely affected when they look at how many people vote. And that may not affect some of the legislative races, et cetera, at this point, but it will affect the national races. And one other thing, I have been an advocate for a long time, is that when you vote for a candidate at the national level, you should have national rules. And that's one of the things that Congress just will not go. If you look at the country, everybody does their own thing. I don't really care about municipal elections or state elections when it comes to that. But when you come to a national election, the people in California are affected by Chuck Grassley. My friends call me every time they see him or laugh about him. And I don't mean any disrespect, but I said, not all Iowans talk like that. And the thing is that if you have a national election for national candidates, you should have similar rules. We don't even do that for the president's race. Every state has their own rules, and that's going to be the problem in 2024, is that you have legislatures who are now nominating and choosing their secretaries of state, whatever, based upon who's going to disqualify voters. So, I mean, I think that's one of the things we have to, as citizens, not Republicans or Democrats, but we all have to look at, is that national elections should be nationalized. They should have national laws. And this argument that every state can make their own rules when it comes to who the senators are. I'm really irritated that Wyoming has 2 senators. I'm really irritated that Idaho has 2 senators. California, I tell my friends in California, I'm much more important than they are. Really, when it comes to voting, I get 2 senators. I get to vote for 1 president. They only get to vote for 2 senators. It doesn't make any sense. There are times where we need to modernize our government, and this is one of those times.
Yes.
Steve, do you have any closing comments as we wrap up of what you need folks to do with your coalition?
Well, I guess I can only ask if you have the time. We greatly appreciate you coming to our event on the 16th. That'll be at the CSPS Hall. That's in, see what I've got, yep. And that's from 1 to 3 on Saturday, April 16th. Tomorrow, we're having the Voters Coalition meeting down at Beams, room A, I think it is, which will have a discussion very similar to this that you're having now. There's conversation out there now. And part of it is that folks like Art and Joel, who are elected officials, shouldn't have to carry the water for all of us all the time. They're elected to represent us, but we have to do our part. That's what democracy is about, civic participation and engagement. So if they're doing what you're asking them to do, they appreciate your support. If they're not doing that, then draw it to their attention. But they need help in trying to do what they're doing, and they obviously, Art would appreciate some more Democrats in where he's at, so that his voice can be stronger, can be louder, and more sincere than the ones that are in the majority power right now. Because whatever they're doing, it's not beneficial to the state of Iowa or to the people of Iowa. You got it.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone who is in the room. It is good to see you, and we will be back in May. For everybody who is online, thank you for being with us. We would just encourage as an organization that you do everything that you can to help people vote and get people registered to vote, to help people to understand why it's important to vote and how that impacts their lives. We also are leading a statewide coalition on voting rights. And so I am just thrilled to have Steve here and be part of the conversation. Next month, we will be back here and we will have State Senator Rob Hogue speaking with us about, as he retires, what his experience has been in the legislature and whatever other issue he wants to talk about. So thank you for being with us, and we will hopefully see you again in May. Take care. Have a great weekend.